Anin, Jimagnish Indigenous Cause. Um, Today I thought we should talk about self honesty. Now, if you're early in recovery, it's highly probable that one of your first experiences, true experiences with self honesty, is going to be admitting that you had a problem, that you are powerless, or that you need help, or you need to make some kind of drastic change in your life. And that's the beginning. Um, a lot of things come along with that self honesty. Um, in a way, it gives you a lot of self freedom. Um, I remember one of my first encounters with true self honesty was when I ended up in the homeless shelter in Duluth, Minnesota. A lot of circumstances had brought me there. I also felt the Creator had a hand in it because I was abruptly taken from where I had started out that morning, with Duluth not even being a thought in the back of my head, to being pretty much dumped by the VA at the homeless shelter. And so I had a little bit of time to reflect on my life, and that first instance was I could have blamed a lot of people for me ending up there. But instead, I kind of evaluated what was going on, and I thought the only person I really have to blame is myself. And that was because I had allowed that to happen to me. I had allowed people into my life that did not have my best interests in mind, and I didn't even have my best interests in mind. It would be a couple of years before I got around to my sober journey, but I had noticed that making that admission to myself, especially like in a spiritual sense, I could feel that my life had started taking a different direction. And so through your sober journey, you really need this self honesty. You need it to hold yourself accountable, um, because you're the only person who can do that. Other people have tried to hold you accountable for years, and that never worked, did it? Capable of making your own decisions. Um, and in the self honesty, this helps you overcome denial. You know, Denial that you need to be walking a different path in life. Denial that if you're going to go a spiritual route, that you need to pay more attention to what the Creator is trying to tell you. And also, self honesty. You ever heard that expression, can't bullshit a bullshitter? If you don't have self honesty, you can't be honest with anybody. And, people that haven't been self honest before can tell when you're not being honest. And, the commitment you've taken to the path of recovery is it's going to help you strengthen relationships with people. And, people are going to want to be around you if you can be honest with yourself. Because you've ever been around these people that are like, well, every time I do this, this happens to me. Well, you're not being honest, because keywords are is every time I do this. Every time you do that, every time you do A, X is the result. And, you're not being very self-honest if you can't see that every time you do A brings about, a bad outcome. And, holding yourself accountable, that's really going to help with your own self-esteem, because you're going to feel good about that. You're going to feel good at, being honest with yourself, being honest with others. That's really, going to give you this internal freedom, and that's going to make your path in recovery a lot easier. I think it did for me. um, I'm not going to say it wasn't tough, because it is tough, but it made it easier. And and in a way, the self honesty too. It's going to help you prevent relapses, because you're going to know what you can expose yourself to. You're going to know when you need to reach out to somebody if you have that self honesty. Um, and self honesty is knowing that, oh, I can't have just one, not one hit, not one drink. And and I see a lot of people that, sadly enough, are at a point where one more hit or one more drink just might kill them. And we all want you here. That's the important thing. So, I hope my words help somebody out today. um, I'm by no means an expert. I can only speak as to how my own experiences have been. um, and if you're liking what I'm saying, give it a like and give it a share. And until next time, Gig Wapman.